gosh, personally, the toll that it takes and the weight of sitting with that as a founder, um, I don't think I understood that when I started out. It's never been easier to start a business, but it's never been harder to grow a business.
Yeah.
For folks starting out and for true startups, the path to cash and the way to figure out how to access cash in the early stages is, and we were just struck by how much we believed that there was a missing middle between kind of folks that were active and had businesses and were doing work. They were trading, they were making money, there was revenue, there was kind of an economic sign of life there. But they hadn't yet been in the experience is completely different. And I think for some people that will be hellish, and for other people that will be heavenly.
Meet David Carbines, a passionate entrepreneur unrelenting about next generation commerce, small business growth, and mental health development. As the co-founder and CEO of Cogsflow and the co-founder of Red Hat Impact, David has a wealth of experience in providing capital, advice, and connections to businesses with positive social and environmental impact. Join us in this episode as David shares his story, discussing the challenges and rewards of startup life, the uniqueness of each startup, and the importance of enjoying the entrepreneurial journey. Get ready for insights on ethical trade finance, mental health in the startup world, and the transformative power of startups to drive positive change.
Morning, Paul. Great to be here.
Great to have you. Now, before we dive into the details, could you share a bit about yourself and your journey so far and what led you to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. I feel like my road into kind of where I'm at has been a long and a winding one. Child of immigrant parents. My mum is born in Malaysia, Chinese Malaysian, and my father's British Australian. I feel like was always pushed to work hard, and they were pretty agnostic as to what that working was in. One older brother, and even from a young age, kind of had lots of stuff thrown at us. Was medium sporty, was kind of a little bit artistic and musical, but I suppose kind of started getting serious about all of this when I left school and was at university. Even at school, I feel like I was one of the passionate people that hung around after a 40-hour famine and said, hey, if all of these things are true, it probably warrants more than an 8-week commitment in my life. So had an abiding interest there. But from a young age, kind of liked things to do with mathematics and commerce, kind of liked liberal arts and ended up at university doing a double degree. And I found myself perhaps the most artistic of the commerce students, and the most commercially focused of my arts student peers. Was still volunteering with World Vision at that stage, volunteered overseas, and when my course finished, found myself going, where should I work and what does that look like? And I knew that even from a young age, I wanted something that would be commercially rewarding, but also have meaning kind of beyond a bank balance and a paycheck.
Mm-hmm. And that inner motivation to help others and be in that space, do you think that's just innate, or is there something that happened in the early part of your life that brought this about?
I absolutely think that's shared and learned and acquired. Traveling with my family as a youngster, making it back to Malaysia and just seeing the quality of life and how people live in Malaysia is very different to Australia.
Yeah.
And then as a university student, again, deferring and spending some time overseas. I was in Cambodia for a few months. It's pretty clear that maybe I went through mild reverse culture shock when I returned. I think that for me was much more about what's going on in life and what can we contribute beyond kind of a 9 to 5.
Interesting. Any impactful stories from that time traveling with your family when you were young that you can remember or that had a big impact on you?
Yeah, a couple of things. Again, maybe seeing my mum in her family context and seeing
Hmm.
her around her siblings. She's got some older siblings, and seeing her kind of as a younger sibling. I'm sure that was meaningful for me, but also more just around awareness of security and safety, what's acceptable, how people live, and kind of the things that we wouldn't do here. That hey, we would wash that, or we just that's not something that you get kids to do
Yeah.
overseas. They're tolerated, or that's understandable, or people are doing the best they can. Look, I probably didn't have the skills to process that and make sense of exactly what that should be or mean, but I was just really aware that it's a big world out there, and not everyone has it the way that I have it.
Yeah, I was in Cambodia about 6 years ago, and yeah, I felt the same thing. I think it just makes us feel so fortunate, living in a country like we do. Um,
I I had the opportunity to return years down the track. I think there was about a 15-year period between kind of
mhm.
my two visits to Phnom Penh, and gosh, seeing that city grow up, kind of going from a large town, a small city,
Yeah.
to a large city, a large bustling, cosmopolitan global city.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, the world is changing very fast.
Yeah, actually, talking about safety and that type of thing, I remember going from Siem Reap to Phnom Penh on a ferry. I think it was a 6-hour ferry, and it was like super fast ferry, and you'd have like a little bit on the side that you could walk past. And I thought, if I fell off here, no one would even know. It's like it hasn't got the same sort of safety that we have here in Australia or OHS. It was just like, oh well, Paul disappeared. Fortunately, I didn't.
Very fortunately, you didn't. I think that idea of being lucky, or making the default luck, OH&S and safety just means that the standard experience for most people in great OH&S regimes is you are lucky every day. And if you're not, we ask questions why, and we try our best to improve that in the future.
Yeah.
That's really, I'm kind of telling one of our family mantras is kind of, one generation better, or better every day. Yeah, that I still find that rewarding and motivating.
Now, as a co-founder of Red Hat Impact, Green Collect, and part-time co-founder of Lend for Good, you've been deeply involved in ventures with strong social impact. Can you share a story of a specific project or initiative that left a lasting positive mark on a community or an individual?
Yeah, I'm co-founder of Red Hat Impact, and I helped co-found Lend for Good. I did not co-found Green Collect. I'm just a board member there. I just
Okay.
volunteer for them. Um, we had our AGM yesterday, and it was amazing hearing kind of some of the annual reports from the year in review.
Mm-hmm.
Green Collect is unique in that it is both a circular economy organisation. Its core business is participating in materials and effects that kind of go through the circular economy.
Mm-hmm.
It's also strongly a positive employer, so it actively seeks and employs people that face barriers to employment. And hearing Sally and Darren, the two co-founders there, share stories about not just the number of tons of products that have been processed through, but the reflections from the staff as to how they find working in that organisation. It hit home for me yesterday. Anecdotes and experiences like staff saying, "This is the first time I've been able to be employed for more than 6 months.
Right.
I've found who I am, and I'm discovering who I am," and hearing kind of staff members in their 30s and 40s reflecting on that.
Mm.
I feel like for me, it's very much around the purpose of life isn't around avoiding discomfort. It's around working hard on things that are motivating and rewarding and that are uplifting. And for folks that participate in employers that participate in that, it's about making environments and making systems and structures that can enable others to thrive. I feel like that was humbled during an AGM yesterday, hearing staff reflections on the meaning that working at an organisation like Green Collect has provided to them. And I'm sure there are countless organisations out there, but there's something magic about that.
That's awesome. And so they really recycle a lot of office furniture and equipment and that sort of thing, no? That generally normally is just chucked out.
Yeah, circular services, circular stores. So one of their core products is going to businesses and larger organizations and avoiding landfill. So reusable, resaleable, recyclable materials are then collected by the kilogram. By the I think the default collection is about 250 kilos. It's brought back to a processing facility where staff sort through incoming product.
Okay.
Some of that is recycled kind of for its raw material. Some of that is resold or refashioned or remade into something else.
Yeah.
And they operate stores and outlets to make that happen.
Okay, awesome. And of course, Red Hat Impact, also Cameron Neal is co-founder as well. And I interviewed him about a month ago, and that was a fantastic interview. Look that up. It's on the podcast. And yeah, that's doing a lot of good as well. In that space, that impact space where, as Cameron says, there's like a $91 billion gap between the mums and dads that want to, funding, and then the VC sort of thing starting at $1 million. And there's a real gap in there. And you guys are, one of the organizations that's helping to, I guess, fill that gap. But I guess there's still a long way to go. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I still look back really fondly as the story of how Cameron and I met. We were working in the same building, but for different organisations. He was general manager of Hub Co-working, and I was working at the Difference Incubator, which is a social enterprise incubator. And we both left those jobs, but we kept on catching up and talking and seeing how the other was going on. And we were just struck by how much we believed that there was a missing middle between kind of folks that were active and had businesses and were doing work. They were trading, they were making money. There was revenue. There was kind of an economic sign of life there, but they hadn't yet graduated into venture capital is its own very specific kind of form of funding. But even kind of helping folks pass the barrier and for folks that want to make a side hustle or a weekend or a night job or a night business, make it into a main source of income, that's an extraordinarily hard journey. That remains an extraordinarily hard journey. So we looked and we said, what could we do to help? And that kind of has set us on an evolution that is, we're 7 years in and going, around what that can look like and how we can play there. There is a massive gap. There's a massive gap for folks that want to do that. I think I was reading an analyst that said it's never been easier to start a business, but it's never been harder to grow a business. And I feel like there are folks around the ecosystem that can help and move money or move knowledge or make it easier to find the right knowledge at the right time. I think we'll be busy for a while to come.
Yeah, and there's so much focus really in the startup world on the unicorns, especially with VCs. They're trying to find that unicorn, so they might fund 10 or 20 startups and knowing that maybe they'll get one unicorn out of that. And then that leaves all the rest that, won't be unicorns because there's only going to be a few and that are going to be unicorns. And that's not necessarily what should motivate us anyway, especially in the impact space. If we got a business that's helping others, doing good, social change, etc., environment, then from my perspective, they're the ones that should be supported the most. And so you guys are doing a great job with that, and also supporting, funding, advising those types of businesses.
Venture capital is great, but it's certainly not the only one. I think it takes a lot of airtime in media and PR, and there are lots of cool stories coming out of that. But as you say, I don't think that's prescriptive for most businesses. Most businesses are not going to be worth $1 billion, and that's okay. There are some great impact venture capital funds out there here in Australia, here in Melbourne. Will Richardson and the Impact Investment Group team, they do fantastic work. But for most businesses, we would strongly encourage them to consider not just financial design and financial outcomes, but as you say, social outcomes, environmental outcomes, and figure out what that means for them. It starts with values and their big why, their massive purpose. And then from that, figuring out which way to proceed. but most of those businesses won't be billion-dollar unicorns, and that's okay.
Absolutely.
There's a group out of the US called Zebras Unite, and their whole idea was, what unicorns break, unicorns build. And I think the way that you operate a business that's trying to become a unicorn is in many ways nonsensical to many folks, because they have to run as fast as they possibly can, and they would rather fail early. Whereas for most folks, I think the learning and experiencing and experimenting discovery process is really valuable as they figure out exactly how they should be working and operating, where social and environmental outcomes are as important as financial ones. Where a financial scoreboard is relatively binary and linear. Social and environmental outcomes are much more complicated.
Yeah, absolutely. And with your involvement in social enterprises, how do you navigate the delicate balance between financial sustainability and social impact? And I did interview a VC, and he said one of the issues with impact startups and funding is sustainability. But then I've interviewed others that said that actually is a bit of a myth. So what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think it's changed over the journey.
Mm-hmm.
I think when I started, it would be very much driving to numbers as soon as possible, and kind of getting into the weeds. I think now, with the benefit of time, I would spend much more time or getting people to write down their why, their personal purpose, and the organization purpose and their why.
Mm-hmm.
And then from that, figuring out what the best way is to proceed. I have a former colleague, Isaac Jeffries, that said, I've talked people around on their business model. I've never talked someone around on their purpose. And understanding their why and what's meaningful for them and the outcomes they're trying to achieve and generate, and then figuring out the economics around that. So working capital requirements, prices, margins, all of that kind of stuff. I think they're both important. Personally, I think the sector swings a little bit towards focusing too much on one and then the other. I think in social entrepreneurship, I would love to see more entrepreneurial skills around understanding markets, pricings, figuring out actors and how that works. By its nature, it's more complicated, where typically users are different from beneficiaries and are different from clients. And so when you separate the people that pay, the people that are doing, and the people that actually get the benefit of those things, it's much harder than, perhaps a local cafe where all of those three users is, I pay the money, I drink the coffee, and I get the benefit of the coffee.
Yeah.
It's naturally harder when you are asking people to pay for other people to fund yet a third group's benefits. But it's not insurmountable, and I think we've got good examples of that coming through and figuring out how that all links together. In Australia, the NDIS is probably the largest instrument of that, of its kind and of its size, where you can see loads of folks delivering services to others. But there are lots of examples about people working really hard to bring through positive outcomes and benefits for others.
Yeah, and what about government tax incentives? Can that be improved? Would that help the space if there were more incentives?
Yeah, crucial. I think there is some great work coming through already on things like R&D tax incentives and export grants, kind of when folks are operating at that stage. But honestly, for folks starting out and for true startups, the path to cash and the way to figure out how to access cash in the early stages is crucial. Yeah. So we are talking about grants. We're talking about ways to move cash to startups. So either grants explicitly for organizations like that, or procurement, local government procurement, state and federal procurement. It's ways to buy services from startups that are aspiring to do things. That's a competitive market. I think some good work has been done, and I'd like to recognize that. But there's heaps more that's ahead, absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting. So as an entrepreneur involved in impactful ventures, there are bound to be challenges. Like in any startup, there's multiple challenges. Could you share a specific instance or failure, and I'll put that in inverted commas because our word failure on this podcast is something we learn from, along the way that had a profound impact on you personally or professionally, and what valuable lessons did you extract from that experience?
Yeah, happy to share a personal one from earlier this year. So we set up Red Hat Impact 7 odd years ago, which is all around the emotions on impact. We kind of named it after the De Bono thinking hats. And it's launched a couple of businesses. One is Lend for Good, which is impact crowd debt for purpose-driven businesses. And a second one that I lead day to day is Cogsflow, which is funding growing e-commerce businesses. It's inventory as a service. And earlier this year, so Cogsflow itself is 3 years old. And earlier this year, I offboarded a co-founder, which was really hard and really painful. Still mates with my former co-founder, but we just got to a point where our raising money from venture capitals and family offices and private angels hadn't kept up with our business ambitions, and we had put cost in the business beyond our own trading revenue and our own trading income. And we got to a point in the middle of the year, and by the end of the September quarter, where our co-founder had to leave. And that was really hard. We've been in the trenches together for 2 years. He's a good mate. We essentially talked every day over the last 2 years, and it's the business equivalent of a divorce. So figuring out what his shares were worth, and kind of making a financial compensation there. But then more on that, it's the sitting in the weight of that and going, gosh, how do we get to this point? And one of our business advisors said, number one, you have to acknowledge that it's a failure. The plans that we laid and where we thought we would be 2 years ago are in a different time zone for where we are right now. And then secondly, David, take a look in the mirror and say, what are the lessons that you've learned? Fortunately, had a space to keep going, and it's not a success story yet. We're still very much halfway through the story, but there is growth there. But gosh, personally, the toll that it takes and the weight of sitting with that as a founder, I don't think I understood that when I started out on this business.
No, I don't think a lot of startup founders realize the extent of the journey when they start out. Having that relationship with the other co-founder, it is like a marriage in a way, because you're with them all the time, you're doing everything, and there has to be a good dynamic there as well, and there's a lot of trust. So I'm going to ask you two things. So when you looked in the mirror, so to speak, as you said, what did you realize?
I think we said this as a team, gosh, maybe a year or so ago. We kind of said, hey, should we focus on running the business, or should we focus on externally raising money and bringing other investors into the business? And at the time, kind of, it was, well, we need to do both. And plainly, we didn't. We focused a lot on external raising. We didn't grow kind of underlying business and the daily trading side. And I'm responsible for both. So that's a personal failure. And I remember kind of in the reflections thinking, I thought that was more tongue in cheek of, wouldn't it be nice to do both? But it really was, no. Both are required. And I think it kind of goes to the small business startup mindset of, look, if there's kind of 20 things that you need to do that day, you kind of have to do 20. It's not good enough to get halfway through it or really nail a couple and then just drop the ball on the others. And I think when I reflect on my performance, I can personalize it like that. That compounds over time. So, foregone actions, things left undone, sales not made, clients not onboarded, in our space, we're business to business. So we have a higher average contract value. And if you lose a couple of those, it hurts. And then if you start losing a few of those cumulatively over time, that can be fatal. And I think that's kind of where we got to over time. And the second kind of big thing that comes to mind as you ask the question on reflections is, okay, so what's going to be different in the future? As this continues, as we go from a team of 2 to a team of 1, am I prepared to do it? I love one of the authors I love is Morgan Housel. His book, The Psychology of Money, is something I'd recommend. But one of the things that he quotes from the people that he interviewed was, in most of life, firstly figure out what something costs, and then secondly figure out if you're prepared to pay that price. And as much as entrepreneurs, we want to hack and come up with a different solution on, is that the true cost? Can we do it better? Can we do it differently? The psychological cost or the personal cost, the personal toll of running a business and operating a business, I don't think there's any way around that. And that was probably the big one. It's like, at this age and stage, with my skills, with where I'm at in life, am I prepared to do this and go again? And for me, the answer was yes. I'm really passionate about the outcomes that we're working towards, the groups we're working with. I think personally, I'm learning a lot along the way. I think I'm a better founder now than I was when we set out 3 years ago at the start of this journey, and 7 years ago at the start of the Red Hat Impact one. And that's extraordinarily rewarding.
Yeah, and look, thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. And yeah, you do have to be really passionate, because once you've been in the space, you realize, like you said, you got to be doing 20 things, at the same time, so to speak. And it's a difficult journey, and there's a lot of ups and downs as well. One day you're euphoric, the next day you're down, you're depressed. It is a very difficult journey. So yeah, you need to be passionate about it. And like you said before, know your why. If you know your why, then that will help a lot. Otherwise, it's almost impossible to sustain that. And you do have to figure out, look, is this what I really want? And is it really worth it? And if it is, go for it. And if you, fail, you learn so much. And then, you can apply that to another startup or another business, or, another situation. So, thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that.
I think, the reward and learning that experience of the difference between working for someone else and having a salaried or a wage earning job, and growing a business, making your own revenue and paying your own salary. Look, it can be the same dollar amount, but the feeling and the experience is completely different. And I think for some people that will be hellish, and for other people that will be heavenly. And I'd encourage everyone listening to this is to figure out where you fit on that spectrum. You can start small, kind of in your nighttime and weekend jobs. The field that we're in, e-commerce, is probably really easy. If you can drive a social media site, you can set up an e-commerce online store, and figuring out how to start there is not hard. But the learnings on that and the personal discovery on what am I great at, what am I dreadful at, is really valuable. Even when we're hiring staff, one of the questions I like to ask is, hey, based on what you know about yourself, what are the kinds of things that you love doing at work and that you will always do, even if we remove them from your job description and move that function to a different part of the team? What will you find a way to get in the room for, be at the meeting at, and just do? And, partly the content on that is interesting. Like, what does that person like to do? But I'm really interested in hearing, like, the self-knowledge on the answer to that, and the self-awareness of someone saying, I'm extraordinarily motivated by this. I will come early and stay late to do that. And the kinds of things that motivate them, not just at the task level, but at the personality type. That's really valuable, and hearing the answers on that from, hey, it's running in spreadsheets, or having face-to-face meetings with people, or, really deep problem solving, or thinking existentially, or I like reading broadly and summarizing one pages for the rest of the team. That's been really exciting and interesting to get to know people.
Yeah, I think every business should really employ that, see what each employee are really passionate about, because if they're working on that type of thing, then they're going to do it really well and be really great at it. And if they're not, they'll just sort of do the task. I've been in different jobs before, and some where I've been really passionate, and then you put all the extra hours, you don't care, and you love it, and you do stuff when you're at home. And then others where you're not, it's just like, you just do the minimum really, because you're so bored, or, it's just so tedious. So finding people's motivations is really important. I absolutely agree with that.
And I think that will be as and even more important in the years and generation to come. I think job descriptions are interesting, but the discipline of writing them is really valuable for
Mm.
employers. But for employees, it's the time scale and the time horizon on this. I don't think most people are working in jobs for the rest of their careers. It's really interesting, and I think the folks at Culture Amp do this really well. On hiring and induction on day one, there's kind of here's your job description, here's what we expect you to do. It'll probably take you a few months to learn it. We expect you to nail it for a period of time, 6 to 18 months or whatever.
Yeah.
And then being deliberate about the discussion on what's your next job. What do you want that to be? What do you think that is? How can we start training you and orienting you for that? Is that inside or outside of the organization? If it's outside, can we start to plan that? Can you hand over what you're doing somewhere else? Can you go with our blessing? The founders there tell this great story of hiring a youngster who wanted to start their own business and bringing them along for meetings on, getting experience in sales, getting experience in funding, and then saying, yeah, we like you. We know you're a great worker. We would like to invest in your next venture. Go with our blessing. How can we figure that? How's it going? You get to talk about that along the way. I think the charade of people have no life or no work aspirations outside their current job, that just doesn't work. And I think in startup land, the more you can be open and honest and transparent about what's going on, I think the more likely that is to succeed for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And having a really nice culture as well and looking after your people is really important. I mean, we did in our startup and we had people stay for a long time, so no, totally agree with that. Now, it's a question I ask a lot of startup founders. Do you think being a startup founder is something do you think we're a special sort of breed or do you think it can just develop over time? Or is it innate or can it develop over time that risk taking, that wanting to do something different, that wanting to work for yourself, I guess, all of those things that I've felt as well all my life?
I think a lot of it is innate, but most of it can be acquired. I think the context and the circumstances are really interesting as well. And kind of one of my historical thought experiments would be to take the same personalities into different times or countries and see how they went. I think the answer to that question is the force of the external pull relative to the internal personality. There's a difference between running a startup, a genuinely new, brand new business, however you want to define a startup, and just a new business. If you're rolling out another McDonald's store, where I used to, I did the graduate program at Aldi supermarkets. So if you open a new supermarket store, I don't think that's a startup.
No,
whereas genuinely new businesses, the founder story, the founder understanding how that all comes together, the pull of this opportunity is too large, the opportunity and the financial rewards, the social environmental impacts, the things that we will do, the people we will help, the folks we're going to employ or the technologies we're going to employ, they're all so specific to that moment. I think a lot of the risk attitude or the risk-taking attitude, though, is relative to their own thinking around, should I do this? For most folks, and kind of certainly the more senior and the older they get, is, should I trade a stable, secure, kind of well-heeled, known quantity job with the excitement and the unknown risks and opportunities of starting a business are really interesting. And I think that is likely to increase as the nature of business changes over the coming years. Once you get to the senior echelons of business, it's kind of similar. The resourcing and the brand, leading a big business kind of through that is a very similar challenge in the risk and identifying opportunities. But there's something that's thrilling and exciting about, starting a business for yourself. Even the rule of thumb, the kind of I use in navigating and talking to people is, did this person get an ABN? Is this person a director in the business? There's something even different from employee number one from I'm a startup founder. That is different. And I'm influenced by, I think it's a Paul Graham essay where he writes about, the risk tolerance of someone is its own dimension relative to their skill or capacity or capability. And I think he looks for founders that have extraordinary risk appetites and that are capable enough. And in hiring their early team, he says naturally founders gravitate to people that have lesser risk appetites, but are probably even more capable than themselves. That's what really excites him about startup teams.
Yeah.
But returning to your original question, I think a lot of it is innate. We can absolutely train a lot more of it and say, and I love what you're doing here with this podcast around failure, or when things don't turn out as they're planned. That's not fatal. It can be fatal for the business. It's not fatal for the individual. What's next? What's excited by you? What have you learned? What's ahead?
Yeah, exactly. And you don't have to identify, you are your own person. The business or your startup is separate. So if something fails, it doesn't work out, well, you've learned so much and you can apply those skills into the future in another startup or in another job, etc. And I actually interviewed Dr. Liz Swigart. She's a psychologist and has many titles in the US. And she was saying humility, but not humiliation. I really like that, So, yeah, be humble. It's always good to be humble. But don't be humiliated because there's nothing wrong, with the things don't work out. That's called life, isn't it? We have come up against problems all the time and we have to overcome them constantly, and we make mistakes, and people that don't make any mistakes don't do anything. They must be dead, because that's life, so we all do it.
Yeah, I love that. I think my wife's a musician, and we often joke about, sight reading from memory, improvising and recording, in the one take. That's really difficult. And the expectations on those are completely different. Are we trying to have a faithful performance of what a composer wrote on the page a while ago, or are we experimenting with our friends and, kind of seeing where it goes? If I'm honest, I think that's a lesson I'm still learning. It's really hard to not take things personally when they are inherently deeply personal. I think it's the taking the care and wanting something enough and so badly, and it's different when it's your own as opposed to, when you're employed by someone else. But as you say, everything that you said around, the learnings as an extraordinarily valuable, and personal identity is much more than just your job and being a startup founder. I think the interplay on those we're still figuring out, but I'm really encouraged by the culture and moving in startup circles. They are some of the most supportive circles I've ever worked in. Founders helping founders. There's a rich ecosystem out there, but purely at the founder level, like saying, I've done this many times, kind of, sending emails out of the blue or knocking on doors or bumping into people at startup events. I'm a founder. I'm working on this. Can you help? People are extraordinarily generous. And by the same token, when people make those requests and asks of me, of course I'll jump on a call. It's, of course I'll respond to an email with and point people as much as I can and help. It's a great community.
Yeah, or jump on a podcast.
Of course.
so if let's say I'm an early stage startup founder, just working from home at the moment, feel pretty lonely, what advice would you give them, or what groups, or what do you think they should do to make all those connections and get that help that's so necessary, especially at the early stage?
Yeah, there are loads of online groups, like jump into a Facebook or LinkedIn. I've benefited the most from the cities in which I've worked and being around co-working spaces, industry groups. So for ours, we were in Stone and Chalk co-working. We're in the Commons. We're a member of FinTech Australia. That's all relevant for our industries.
Yeah.
And sooner or later, you meet other founders and they'll put you in touch with other people. And honestly, they are the most valuable groups. They're the, kind of the real talk and the real sharing. I think figuring out how to share and be vulnerable and have others be vulnerable around you, and some of the stories you hear about, extraordinary successes and extraordinary setbacks and failures, we use that word gently, that's huge. I think the ability on social media right now is kind of, promoting our best selves and always sharing about where things are going great. there's a space for that. I think it's slowly kind of becoming a more vulnerable space where people can share when things aren't all rosy. But in terms of reaching out to other founders, go online, find groups, and seek a human connection.
I interviewed Ben Jeffries from iTech Global, I think it is, ATech Global, and you'll know him. I think you helped fund him, though. And
yeah, Ben's excellent.
Yeah, it was a great interview. And
his experience with School for Social Entrepreneurs, Engineers Without Borders, where I worked and kind of helped co-found ATech, and his experience across Australia, Cambodia, and now ATech is global. I'll lose track of their footprint, but I think they're in half a dozen countries or so and growing. Yeah. His experience is invaluable. We were in the same building, working out of the same building when I met Cameron as well. Right. But his experience of meeting with other founders and seeing the experience in Australia versus overseas, I had to go back to my high school and talk a little bit about what I did, and the things that I said was, a startup. I'm not sure everyone wants a startup. I think everyone wants a scale up where they're well funded, they understand what they're doing, and they're growing. Startups are inherently messy. They're figuring it out. They've got a plan. They've got a story. Yeah. And it's their job to make that story come true or change the story. Yeah. And finding help along the way from people that will buy from you, super valuable. People that will invest in you, also valuable. People that will help bring your dream to reality. That's cool as well. But that is super valuable. And finding travelers on that journey, really rewarding.
What he was saying is that he's worked in some of these, startup or accelerator sort of environments. I think he ran one somewhere, but he said for him the greatest help that he had was just talking with other founders. He said, if you get in a room with other founders, you can pretty much sort out just about anything. And I found that as well, because I just started just working from home. And then a friend of mine said, why don't you go to the Macquarie Uni Incubator? So I went there and I started, and then I applied there. And it's a little bit different to other incubators. Like you can actually stay there for a long time. I was there for 4 years. So I've got, wonderful friends there and other startup founders, and we'd always talk. And I'd find those conversations always the most helpful, more than other mentors and that sort of thing. I mean, it's all important, but those other conversations with founders that are going through or have been through what you're going through are always, I find, the most valuable.
Yeah. My family just moved from Melbourne to Perth earlier this year, and I joined a startup program called +8, hosted by Space Cubed, which is a co-working space there, and supported by Better Labs, which is one of the innovation studios there. And kind of going through that program, it was competitive, where it went from 70 to 20 to 12. I was there for 3 months, and they are some of the best friendships and relationships, hearing people talking about building their businesses and how they're going and how it's working and how it's not. Yeah. No agendas, there's no reporting to the outside world, but, asking founders and saying, hey, Paul, how's it going? Are you hiring? How's it going with customers? How are you going building a digital thing? And the stories and the support around that, it's real. The time pressures, the financial pressures, figuring out how they balance or how they think about their social and environmental impacts. For folks that are just new to that, come along to social events hosted by co-working spaces, join programs like that. You'll see and meet other founders. They wrap around, kind of some other stuff around you, which is extraordinarily valuable too. But founders meeting other founders, that's really valuable.
It's really great advice. And to wrap up, I'm going to ask you something I'm asking everyone. If there was only one piece of advice, just one, you could give an early stage startup founder, what would that be?
I think the number one advice I would give startup founders is to write it down.
Okay.
Whatever it is, whether it's your purpose and mission for starting, or whether it's your results for the week, or what you want to achieve for the next fortnight, whatever it is, just write it down. Mm-hmm. Write it down. You can share it. Other people can see it, comment on it, help you. And the act of writing it down and getting better at writing it down, again, it's a learning point for me, I think will help you be a better founder. It gives you, you can be retrospective, so you can see where you were at in the past. Yeah. and hopefully the learnings that you will see, the questions you're asking, the things you're working on, the direction which you're moving should be encouraging as you look back at what you were writing down months, quarters, years
Mm.
ago, and what you're writing down now, what you get to focus on, I think would be better. So
Yeah.
a little bit simple and maybe a little bit trite, but just write it down.
No, it's really good because, you come up against so many issues as a startup founder, but then sometimes if you look back, you think, you know what, I achieved a hell of a lot. But then if you only see all the problems in front of you, then you forget all of that. So I think that's really good advice.
From hosting this podcast and asking that question many times, what are the answers that have stood out to you, that have resonated with you?
Um, oh, look, there's so many I can't really remember in this moment. Yeah, I I can't really say that because there's so many. I don't think there's any one that stood out, but nearly all of them have been great advice because we're all individuals, and so some people relate to some more than others. Um, but yeah,
If you gave me a second opportunity to say something, or what was your first two, I think the encouragement would be, every startup is unique. It's a product of the founder, it's a product of the business, it's a product of the market and the technology set that they're launching into, the commercial realities and appetite. And as much as there's great advice kicking around, it's often confusing and contradictory because what's worked in one context is the exact opposite of what your context calls for. And that's part of the joy and the frustrations and the rewards of running a startup. And perhaps my second one is, you are unique, and enjoy the journey because it's not a paint by numbers exercise. That's not what startups are.
no, and enjoy the journey. That's so important because life is just a journey, and you may want to achieve a certain thing with your startup and reach a certain goal, and then what? That's what happens to a lot of people. They might become a unicorn or whatever. They might be miserable after that. You don't know. You know what I mean? Just having a lot of money doesn't mean anything, really. I mean, there's a lot of happy people in the world that are not billionaires. You don't need to be. In fact, I reckon it'd be very stressful to be a billionaire, personally. You have so many issues around like security and all that sort of stuff. But I think what you're doing in the space is helping others to do good, in the mental health area, in sustainability, in so many areas, in the impact area, and that must give tremendous satisfaction. I think that's what the journey is all about. If you can help others, and if you can do something good, then you're helping them, and at the same time you're feeling good as well.
Yeah, I love that. I don't think it's our job to define exactly what a startup is. There's loads of good definitions kicking around, in search of a business model designed for high speed growth. The ones that make me smile are, people that pay salaries on credit cards. Or I think my most favorite one right now is, running at your problems as fast as you can publicly. But I think startups as a vehicle to achieve change in the world, I love. Startups as independence and as the ability to design and bring imagination to reality, I love. Startups as a vehicle to help people, I really love. Core to the Cogsflow story is a friend of mine who ran a small e-commerce store, ran into mental health challenges, and he ended up in hospital. And as I looked around at the support that was available to him, with the greatest of respect, mindfulness apps and meditation apps weren't going to move the needle for him.
Yeah.
He was stressed about money. He was stressed about money going out and money coming in. And, the best thing that I could do and see was to not pressure him as someone who'd given him money, but to change the way under which that money is repayable to me. And that kind of went core to our product design, but also to the ethos of the company and helping a next wave and a next generation of entrepreneurship where the mental health load and barrier should be more sustainable. I think by their nature, startups are always going to be risky and a bit stressful, but I don't think they should be existentially and to the point that they are now. And that's kind of one of the guiding principles that drives everything that we do at Cogsflow.
Yeah, and also it actually, I would say, would help the startup to be more successful as well. Having that sort of financial model where they don't have to pay it back straight away. Because I was reading about that on your website. Can you explain that just a little bit more?
Yeah, so we serve growing e-commerce businesses. Every one of the founders that we work with loves their product and loves their customer.
Yeah.
You know, I haven't met one of them yet that started their business because they love doing spreadsheets on a Saturday night. So by design, our model fills their warehouse with the product that they need. We pay inventory bills. We send money to their suppliers. We apply fixed markup, so there's no interest that compounds daily. And as they sell and generate cash, they pay us back. So on average, we cycle money through, and we treat our money in the same way that our customers, our merchants, view their inventory. So we think we should be a part of their funding mix. They're going to need their own funds. They can use external funds, and there's a variety of them out there. But we hope to be the best way that they buy inventory, something that's core business for each one of our e-commerce businesses. We want to be the best way that they buy inventory, that they repay inventory, and they can focus on their products, their customers, their other bits of their business they need to grow. We just want to make sure that we've got their back as they do it, and that their warehouse is filled so that they can go off and do great marketing and PR, that they can get great volumes and traffic through their sites, and that they have confidence that as they convert, they will make margin and that they will pay us as they see cash themselves.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic because there's a lot of businesses out there that don't have that cash to do that, and it just sort of stops them from being a business. And this way, it's like it's a win-win. They can go ahead and they can, progress in their business and get more customers, and there's more cash flow, and then they can pay that. I think it's great. I think there should be a lot more of that. I think it's wonderful work that you guys are doing, or that you're doing. Now it's your.
Thank you. For folks that are launching businesses now, I think the tooling and the conditions of launching a business, they're great now. They're better than they were in the past, and I think they will be even better in the future. Like the things that businesses can focus on and make better now, I think are getting better.
Yeah.
Focusing on the core mission of whatever it is that's at the heart of an entrepreneur and at the heart of a startup business. Hopefully they can execute on those quicker and better and more cleanly. And it'll be easier to do that in the future. I'm really excited for all that's ahead.
Yeah, and that's when you need the most help in a startup at the beginning, really, especially if you have no funds of your own, and like inventory and that sort of thing, as you said. So that's it's great work that you're doing.
Thank you. I'm really excited for all that's out there, for all that's ahead. I think of the great work of our clients and kind of the meaning behind those. Folks selling products that donate to kind of charities. That's okay. That's cool. Folks selling products that address a core need, so the shift to sustainability and getting away from things that are single use or things that are less sustainable, and kind of moving consumption into higher quality products that have less environmental footprint and a better social footprint on where they've come from and how they've been made.
Yeah.
We love the B Corp space. We're a fair trade member. We're excited for all that's ahead.
Yeah. Would you? If you think about it, is there some startup or startup founder that has done the journey and has come out of that, and they're doing a lot of good at the moment with your help, but you may have thought at the beginning, that this is not going to work out, or they've come from like a really difficult space and they've gone through and they've come out the other end with your help and been very successful in the impact space?
I'm conscious of sharing stories that aren't mine to tell. By our nature, we sit on a lot of client data that is confidential and that we can't share explicitly. But let me tell you two stories.
Okay.
So I started working as a teenager. I studied commerce. I did a double degree. So I studied full-time until I was in my mid-20s.
Okay.
We have worked with the daughter of one of our clients. We started working with her mother and her when the student was in year 11, and she's now in first year university. she runs an e-commerce business, and I guess the impact is kind of in her and her entrepreneurial journey.
Mm-hmm.
Based on her gross margins, so her sales less her cost of product and less her fees to us, in 3 years, she has grossed more revenue than I earned in my entire time as a student before I left university.
Mm-hmm.
And she's still got a couple of years left of her undergrad.
Yeah.
Um, the insights that she will have during her commerce degree, I imagine, will far exceed that of many of her lecturers and tutors.
Absolutely.
Her understanding of microeconomics and firm theory and firm decision making is absolutely hands on. You know, she runs a 6-figure e-commerce business. That encourages me as to what she will go on and achieve during her career. And whether she stays in e-commerce, she takes a policy role, she goes into a large organization, whatever it is, I think the future is brighter from more entrepreneurs like that in our world. And the second story that probably comes to mind is a brand that was a healthcare brand targeting women that had some B2C sales. And one of the kind of core inflection points for businesses like this is when they turn on wholesale distribution and they seek volume, they sacrifice margin, but they start distributing and selling through stockists, and they wanted to grow volume. That would not have been possible without external funding from folks like us. So seeing that business grow by an order of magnitude, and the effect that that had on their supply chain, you know, their ability to purchase and buy better from their suppliers, the way that that transformed their business in volumes and seeing them invest in sales and marketing, I think was a game changer. And seeing businesses not just start and have a sign of life, not just kind of, you know, continue on for another few months or for another year and saying, oh yeah, there's a sign of life. Oh yeah, this could be a nice little kind of weekend job.
Yeah.
But actually going, no, this can be a large business. This can be a growing concern. This can distribute loads of products that by their use make the world a better place, that can employ a lot of people, that can transform a founder's life into, oh, wow, this is going to pay me more than my salaried job.
Yeah.
That's exciting as well.
It is, especially if they're in that space, that impact space. I think with the startup, a lot of people start part-time, and then it can get to one point where, like, okay, this thing is becoming real. I got to dedicate a lot more time to this. Well, that sort of happened with me. I started part-time, and then said at some point, well, no, this thing is real, you know, and then, it sort of changes what you do and the way you think as well. Thanks for sharing those stories.
Yeah, pleasure. They're probably the ones that I've been closest to directly. But I was at West Tech Fest a couple of weeks ago, and I heard Olympia Yaga speak. She's the founder of GoTerra, which I think she would call is robotic maggots that breaks down food waste and kind of puts it back into the biosphere. She is an inspiration. She's a force of nature. You know, her background of having done loads of jobs, again, storytelling and coming up with a system that is brand new. No one else was doing it at the time, drawing on her experiences as a farmer. As climate change is coming, farming is not going to be sustainable. What can be done? Attracting investment, overcoming challenges is the first one. Yeah. I personally loved her founder stories on saying, what has she learned along the way, and, set up the parameters, give the team everything they need, and then get out of their way, stop tinkering with them, give them time to achieve it. I loved hearing her talk about that. And I think there are loads of Olympias still to come through. Again, that makes me extraordinarily excited.
Yeah. And that whole thing about getting out of their way, it's like, as a founder, what you want to do is bring on people, I think you said that before anyway, that are better than you in all these different areas. And then eventually, you get out of their way, and you come to realization, I guess, when you get at some point, if it's quite successful, that, these people are all more skilled than you. So what should I be doing? What's the best thing I can do? And sometimes you might have been the CEO, and then you might have, the best thing may be to step aside because another CEO may do a better job than you, which is quite often happens as well.
Yeah, the job titles are kind of shorthands, or they're approximations for what we think people should be doing.
Yeah.
But the way that that actually works, and the way that that actually works as a startup, is so unique. You know,
Mm.
that's where founder or co-founder as a job title. I understand what that means. I know that they're across everything, and that then the buck stops with them.
Yeah.
All of those other functional titles probably can speak to their background or their area of the business that they work in. But I don't know, the core founder trait of articulating a vision or articulating an end state for how they want the world to be or the company to be at the end of that week or quarter, gathering the resources, putting the right people on the task, and helping that team through.
Mhm.
Sometimes helping involves getting out of their way and saying, "Do you have everything you need? Are you right? Okay,
Yeah.
let's talk again at the end of the week or fortnight or whatever it is, or quarter, and let's go." That's exciting. That's encouraging, as you can start to build a large organization that can deliver on what you're about.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly how we operated. We give them a lot of freedom. We really look after them, and they just would work, with great dedication to the startup and to the founders, and everybody. We sort of had a flat. There was no pyramid thing. Everyone was the same. That sort of staying humble and treating everybody equally, and that worked really well. So you get really, really dedicated people working for you in that way, just by looking after them really and trusting them.
And that's probably a great grounding or founding place for starting place for future founders. Like, hey, if you can be given a challenge and nail it within a specific context, okay, well, that's fantastic, and you can do that repeatedly. Can we increase the contexts and the scope of challenges that can be put in front of you? That's startup life.
Yeah.
Startup founders kind of have every challenge in every context, from
Yeah.
regulation to compliance to reporting to financial to customer service to technology to HR to like the list is endless.
It
If you
is.
can nail one of those, fantastic. Can you find others that can handle the ones that you can't?
Yeah.
Even better. Can you bring on professionals and experts to do that, 1 or 2 day a year job, or to sign off on something, or to help you along the way? That's a startup. Congratulations. Keep going.
Awesome. Well, David, it's been great having you on. Some really fantastic advice for early and new startup founders, and I particularly admire the space you're working in and helping so many other startups to be successful or not, but giving them the best chance possible to do that, and helping the environment, helping mental health, so many areas that you're helping. So it must give you a lot of self-satisfaction as well, and really appreciate what you're doing. And thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Thanks, Paul.